Good morning, everyone. Today we're joined by Father Otto Hentz. And Father Hentz is a professor in the Department of Theology and Religious Studies, a gifted teacher, and a cherished member of our community. He first taught in our Department of Philosophy in the 1960s. And then after being ordained as a priest and pursuing his doctoral work, returned to Georgetown as a member of our Department of Theology in the mid-1970s. Last academic year, he marked 50 years of teaching at Georgetown. So Otto, thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. And let's jump right in. I want to start with a class that you are well known for among generations of Georgetown students, Problem of God. Can you reflect on this course, which has been transformative in the life of so many of our students? Why has it been important for us to have this course in our curriculum now for more than 5 decades? What kind of experiences does it offer our students?
Well, we're deeply committed to a liberal arts education. And a liberal arts education means you're trying to understand what it means to be human. And to do that, you've got to ask some very fundamental questions. What does it all mean? What does it all mean? And there's no more direct way to address that question than to ask about the ultimate, the problem of God. It goes right in. And the advantage of having the course for freshmen, as much as you can, it's not always possible, they can do it as freshman year, is that you get them into the basement right away. I remember a semester last year, one young woman took the course as a senior, and she said, you ought to do this for seniors because they're older and will get more. Well, there's some reason for that because it's very demanding for freshmen. It's a kind of topic they've never addressed before. They're always looking at stuff that's on the table, the causes for the Civil War, or how much 2 and 2 counts, and they have to do an interiority turn. So it's demanding for them. But also, I think it's also, it sort of grabs a lot of them, not everybody, but I would say most of them, because they're, first of all, they're kind of curious, what's the problem of God business? But then they have to get into into what I call a very fundamental basement issue. So that's really critical, and that's why it's so important.
Yeah,
it's as fundamental as you can get, and you can't have a liberal arts education unless you are trying to understand the human with a view maybe to get some basic vision and some basic value system by which you can organize your life and your choices.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure.
Now, you're teaching a course in the Introduction to Catholic Theology.
Right.
As you think about the role of the Catholic Church in our current moment, it's been more than 5 decades since the Second Vatican Council. Pope Francis has just entered his 8th year as Pope. And we have only our second American president, who's also a practicing Catholic. Can you talk about some of the conversations and issues that you're exploring with your students this semester?
Right. We're about to move into very specific issues, or relatively specific issues, like social justice, the mission of the church for social justice, church and politics, the church itself, authority and dissent, women's issues. There are all sorts of issues on the table. But before you do that, it's really critical to lay down some basic framework that people have to think through. What does it mean to be in relation to the mystery of God? What depth and reach is there? And then, very important for Americans, a theology of freedom. I'd say there are 2 key things in doing the fundamental Christian anthropology. And one is freedom. Because Americans, the operative political theory of most Americans, who never even spell the word theory, maybe, freedom is essentially individualistic. Ideally, I can do whatever I please, but I have to compromise because there are other people around. You stop on red and I go on green, and things like that. And of course, that's not the Christian understanding of freedom. So you've got to work at that. If you're going to do Catholic theology, you've got to do a fundamental understanding of freedom. And I'd say, secondly, and slightly different category, the imagination. The Catholic imagination is both and. And we're in a culture which very much these days and regularly thinks either or. I said to my students the other day, you may not use the word or in anything you write for me. Either this or that, either this or that. Is it this or that? The Catholic imagination is both and, God and world, nature and grace, Christ and humankind in general, church and society at large. And so with those foundations established in the person of Christ, who's divine and human, both and, then you can move into specific issues, which we're about to do now. And there are plenty on the table. I mean, as you know very well, I mean, broader questions of, the fissures in our society and so forth. What do we do about faith and politics? And then within the church itself, there are a lot of issues on the
table. Got it. Now, over the course of your years, you've taken such an active role in mentoring and serving as a spiritual advisor to so many of our students and our alumni. Can you talk about what it's been like to form these lifelong connections and guiding our students over your many years at Georgetown?
Yeah. Well, it's been rich beyond telling. I mean, where would you begin? And of course, mentoring and advising and so forth, that's a two-way street. If somebody asks me a question, I have a chance to address what's on their mind. But it also challenges me to think and figure some stuff, So they're constantly inviting me to be alive. And what's interesting about Georgetown, at least in my experience, and as I say, I only meet a few students every year, well, more than a few, but I've been doing it, as you said, for 50 years. And the bonding here is very strong. So what makes it easy to keep in touch with a lot of people and have a lot of conversation is that you can do it in groups and very serious stuff. You're not just restricted to sports and the weather because they've been formed together and grew up together. And the bonding here makes it easy to stay in touch with a lot of people and talk about a lot of serious stuff.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Now, we're in the Lenten season. Now our second Lenten season during the pandemic.
Right.
Can you offer a few thoughts about your reflections, your approach to this moment as we prepare to observe Holy Week and ahead of Easter? What are some of the ideas that are guiding you in this time?
I guess more than usual, a focus really on the business of suffering and the problem of evil. And the reason is we've got the pandemic, we have the racism, all this stuff is right on the table in front of us, the immigration and poverty issues, et cetera, and issues within the church. And so it can, I think you can worry a bit about getting skeptical or cynical. What is possible? What's possible in the midst of all this confusion and very difficult living? And Lent, the whole build in Lent, and when you're dealing with questions like that, is looking for the Paschal mystery, the death and resurrection of Christ. And there are two things about that. First, the death. You can never doubt God's love when you look at the cross, because there's this radical identification with human suffering. The most poignant thing in human living is suffering, and God's Son is right there. Boom. There's no answer. You can't do a lot in theory. No answer on that intellectual analysis level. But there it is, the living level. And then, of course, that kind of love leads to resurrection, which is the basis for our trust. And so I think all the stuff that's going on that we're dealing with and reflecting and thinking about it and questioning about and being confused by, all that points to appreciating anew and in a much deeper way what we celebrated Holy Week.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, when we opened up Village A in 1979, I think you were one of the first residents to move into the new residence hall, and you were there for more than 3 decades.
Right.
When you think about campus life and what you've been a part of all these years, are there special moments that come back to you that you think of when you think about the joy of being a part of this?
Oh, well, I mean, for years, I never locked the door. I locked the study in the back, in the bedroom, but there was nothing there to steal except the furniture and a tub of ice cream. So I was the subject of many, many practical jokes. I could spend your afternoon listening to practical jokes. One of the funniest was when I came back and opened up the freezer. I was going to see how was it with the tub of ice cream, and somebody had put a carving knife in it with a sign saying, "This is empty." Well, underneath, somebody else had come along and wrote a note and said, "And besides, we're tired of chocolate chips." So very funny moments, but wonderful moments. All sorts of conversation, head on head and in groups. I think one of the best moments was when 4 seniors declared that they want to do a year of service work in the third world. And I said, go see the Peace Corps. And then it occurred to me, why not hook them up with some Jesuits? So we started a program, as did BC at that time in Creighton, and that gave rise to Jesuit Volunteer International. One of the most poignant moments was when Bob Drinan, a Jesuit who had been, God rest him, in Congress for 5 years, deeply committed to that work. I remember he came home one night and said, "We just passed a federal criminal code and it's awful, but it's a little better because I was there." Well, in his 5th term, he was ordered by the Vatican to leave. And it was very hard on him. Turns out I had invited him to come over for dinner with a group of seniors just after that. And when he wasn't there very long before a senior said to Bob, tell us about being ordered actually to leave Congress. And Bob said, "Well, I could either leave Congress or leave the priesthood. There was no choice there." Well, I think the kid, the student, and I did too, expected an hour's conversation about this. It lasted 30 seconds. It was so edifying. Yeah. And there was a lot more going on in him than he said in 30 seconds. But that was perhaps the most touching moment. I don't know. So many moments.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I think it sets an example for some students. You can't do it for everybody. The fruit that comes out of that kind of gathering.
We're all the beneficiaries of your extraordinary presence here over the course of all these years. As we close the conversation, is there a message you'd like to share with our community?
Somebody else asked me that recently. What advice do I have? I said it's very fundamental. I suggest that people pray some. As I put it, it keeps the soul from shrinking. Keeps the soul from shrinking. And it puts you in touch with the love that's at the heart of all this. And that's important because it precludes cynicism, any serious cynicism. And it invites openness. So now, there are a lot of people who are not religious. So I have another suggestion for them and for religious people, and that is what I call mezzanine moments. Go up on the mezzanine, watch yourself playing the game of life, and check, say, the way I'm playing, what am I acting out here? What do I think the game is all about? And how do I think it ought to be conducted? Jesuits call that an examen. So for everybody, and it might be a help for people who aren't particularly religious, who prayer isn't their thing, a mezzanine moment.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
And thank you for sharing your reflections and joining us in this conversation. I'm grateful to you for our decades of friendship and for all that you mean to our Georgetown community.
Great to get to visit, Jack. Great to get to visit.
I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.